Well, the future of travel in Australia is up in the air, pardon the pun, after Virgin was placed into voluntary administration this morning. If the failing airline does not continue, Australia will be left with only one full-service national domestic carrier, and that'll be Qantas. Joining me now is aviation expert Mr Geoffrey Thomas from Perth. Thank you very much for your time, Mr Thomas.
Peter.
Take us through how this all works. They're in voluntary administration. We're told there are 10 or so players out there circling the carcass of Virgin. What happens next?
Well, it's a very good question, and everybody wants to know the answer. Absolutely. Look, the administrators say it'll take 2 to 3 months to get a new investor on board. They're going to renegotiate the leases on the aircraft. A lot of the debt is unsecured, so there'll be some restructuring of that, and also restructuring of the secured debt as well, because a lot of that debt is secured against aircraft. But the reality is, in the COVID-19 situation, there's not a very big market for aircraft. So there's deals to be done here, and with the restructuring of the debt, Virgin itself, the core of the airline, is very, very good. It's a really good airline with fabulous service, great product. So that it's not surprising that 10 suitors, if you like, are circling. And then you've got the Queensland Government and the New South Wales Government in a bidding war for the relocation of the Rebirth of Virgin. So they're very confident they're going to fly out of this.
Okay, so clearly coronavirus has tipped them over the edge, but they were on the precipice anyway with the debt burden. How did it get like that? Was it, as I've been told, aircraft, new facilities, those sorts of acquisitions?
Look, indeed, Peter, they've gone through various stages. It started off as Virgin Blue in 2000. It was one of the major reasons that AUST collapsed in 2001. It then grew significantly. And then Qantas responded with Jetstar and with lower costs. So Virgin found itself in a very awkward situation. So it then went upmarket slightly to start off with, and then under the stewardship of John Borghetti, the former general manager of Qantas, really started to go way upmarket, head-to-head with Qantas, with beautiful lounges, all sorts of beautiful business class beds in domestic business class. So yes, they did overextend. They went from a one aircraft fleet, the 737. They ended up with 6 different types of aircraft, 3 different classes instead of one class. And so yes, they have overreached, and that strategy didn't work because the main problem was that the corporate traveller was wedded to Qantas's frequent flyer program and couldn't be enticed across to Virgin in sufficient numbers.
So just let me jump in there. What happens then? How do we stop the rebirthed Virgin, and let's, fingers crossed, say stay in the market in some way? How do we stop that new entrant or the rebirthed entrant just cherry picking the most profitable routes like, Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and Melbourne and the sort of the eastern seaboard, and walking away from some of the harder routes, which is regional centres and some of the less popular states in terms of travel, like, the Adelaides and others? How do we make it so that they truly are a national domestic airline, so there is a true competitor to Qantas?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Peter. And I think part of that solution will be the federal government. Now, the federal government has balked up till now in assisting Virgin because it would be seen to be bailing out a group of foreign airlines. Now, they've indicated that with Virgin with Virgin in Australian hands or Australian investors, which appears to be where it's going, then they would look at a whole of industry support package for COVID-19, because we're talking Virgin Australia at the moment. In 6 or 7 months' time, if the borders don't get lifted internationally, we could be talking Qantas as well. And in the United States, the Trump administration has stumped up 90 billion Australian dollars to support its airline industry. That sort of support is being replicated around the world. We haven't really done anything tangible. So get back to your question, if the Australian government then puts a whole of industry support package together, part of the deal would be to Virgin's new buyer, you have to serve these regional routes, you have to maintain the network, and you have to maintain broadly the same number of staff. That could be part of the package going forward.
There's a real inference over the last few weeks that, look, it doesn't matter if Virgin goes under, another airline will just come out of the woodwork and it'll start almost immediately. You've got a lot of experience. I was around in government in the Ansett collapse days. Of course, I don't know it as intimately as you do, but I remember talking to pilots out of the Federation who used to come to Canberra and raise a lot of issues with us. You know, so many of them had to take foreign jobs. Some of them never came back to work in the Australian skies again. A lot of the training was from scratch. It really was about 10 years before we had a truly strong airline competitor. That's what people don't understand. It's not an overnight proposition, is it?
Look, indeed, you're absolutely spot on the mark. You can't snap your fingers and suddenly an airline appears, particularly in this COVID-19 situation. And we need, once the state borders are relaxed, we absolutely need two vibrant carriers to offer the really cheap fares to support the tourism industry, which is really, really doing it tough around Australia. If we have one carrier, we'll probably have one carrier for quite a few years before another one establishes itself in Australia. And then it takes, as you suggest, several years to build up from there to something that's actually comparable. So it's imperative that we save Virgin as it is. I mean, you've got 10,000 incredibly passionate, loyal, and professional staff. It's a real national asset. I know it's in foreign hands right now, but let's get it into Australian hands, give it a helping hand, and the whole country's a winner.
Given Australia's reputation too for having the, if not close to, if not the safest record in terms of aviation safety in the country, in the world, indeed, in the world. Geoffrey Thomas, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure, Peter.